Today we are going to be going over our Week 6 power rankings for the 2024 NFL season. And without further ado, let's get into these power rankings. The first group we have is at 32, Patriots, 31, the Panthers, Titans at 30, the Browns at 29, and the Dolphins at 28. So, Patriots and Panthers are the two worst teams, unfortunately. Patriots are actually going to start Drake May now, so we'll see how that goes. Panthers, they had their great win versus the Raiders. They had their competitive loss to the Bengals. And then they just got blown out by the Bears, who are in the middle of the league, I'd say. So I think it's fair to put them at 31. Titans at 30. I don't think they played. I think they had a bye week, if I'm not mistaken. But I just feel like the Dolphins and Browns, the Dolphins won their game versus the Patriots, so I think they're the best of these tiers, especially I just consider the fact that Tua is still injured. And then the Browns just haven't looked good. The Browns just have not been a good team. So I have them at 29. This is the bottom tier competing for that number 1 draft pick. Dolphins are in there until they get Tua back. Next group, we have the Jags at 27, the Raiders at 26, the Rams at 25, the Giants at 24, the Colts at 23, and the Jets at 22. First of all, Jags coming off their first win, an impressive win versus the Colts. Take Bigsby, Brian Thomas played great. Trevor Lawrence is slowly picking it back up. So I gave them big boost. As the only reason they were down there is because they hadn't won a game. They looked good versus the Texans, and then they're coming off of this win versus the Colts. Raiders at 26. They haven't honestly played very good, including getting blown out by the 31st best team in the league. They came off of last week they had a blowout loss to the Broncos, who aren't a bad team anymore, but still, you got blown out by the Broncos. Quarterback situation does not look good. Devontae Adams could be traded any minute. So, I have them at 26. Rams at 25. This, just like the Dolphins, is mainly an injury reason. They're just so injured right now, so they can't really compete. They did have that very good win over the Niners, just like the Raiders had their win over the Ravens, so I don't want to lower them too much. But I feel like the Giants, after their performance versus the Seahawks, and in recent weeks overall, beating the Browns, staying competitive with the Cowboys, and then beating the Seahawks, the Giants and Daniel Jones particularly have played very good. Daniel Jones has looked like a very solid quarterback. So although the Rams and Raiders had those impressive wins, I do think the Giants deserve the spot above them. Now they couldn't quite get the spot over the Jets and the Colts because the Jets were 17th and they lost to the Vikings, who are a top 3 team, top 5 team. The Colts were 23, or the Colts were 19, and then they lost to the Jags. So I could put the Giants over the Colts, but I decided to keep the Giants at 24, Colts at 23, could be flipped, and then the Jets, they lost to the Vikings, so I don't want to punish them too much. Next group we have is the Chargers at 21, the Bears at 20, the Broncos at 19, the Cardinals at 18, and the Bengals at 17. Chargers, they had a bye week, so it's hard for them to go up. But I didn't want to obviously move them too much for not playing, so I have them at 21. I just thought I'd give credit to the 3 teams above them for impressive wins. Bears, yeah, you beat the Panthers, but you blew them out, so it was impressive. Caleb Williams looked great. The Broncos had an amazing win over the Raiders. I think that's 3 straight for them, so I gave them the spot over the Chargers. And then the Cardinals, coming off their incredibly impressive win over the Niners. So I have those three teams above the Chargers, even though they didn't technically play. Their wins were just very impressive, so I wanted to give them that. And the Bengals actually moved up. This is the main reason the Bengals moved up is because of teams like the Chargers, Jets, and Colts going down. But the Bengals looked good versus the Ravens, at least their offense did. Their offense continues to be one of the best in the league, and their defense continues to be one of the worst in the league. But they almost beat the Ravens. They should have beat the Ravens, who are a top team. So I put the Bengals at 17. I feel like that the Cardinals and Bengals could be flipped around. Then we get the Seahawks at 16, the Steelers at 15, Saints at 14, Eagles at 13, and Bucks at 12. Seahawks coming off of a disappointing loss at home to the Giants, who I know aren't that bad of a team, but they were 27th on my rankings going into this game, and the Seahawks were 13, and they lose at home. So I think the four teams above them make sense with the Seahawks kind of falling down a little bit. I didn't want to lower them too much because they have played good for most of the season. Steelers at 15. I know they lost to the Cowboys, but it was a close loss, and I think the Seahawks loss or the Saints. I guess we'll get to the Saints, but the Steelers' loss was worse or better than the Seahawks' loss, so I have them above them, as well as the Saints. Saints lose to the Chiefs. You lose to the best team in the league, so I think the Seahawks' loss was the worst of those three, hence why the Saints and Steelers moved up despite losing. Then we get the Eagles at 13. They didn't play. I just think the teams above that I have above them have overall played great and played pretty good in the most recent week. And the Eagles haven't looked great. I've just kept them high because they've lost to good teams. So I know they didn't play, but they're at 13. Bucks at 12. It wasn't a bad loss to the Falcons by any means, but the Falcons were lower than them on the rankings. The Falcons were 12. The Bucks were 8. So I decided to give the Falcons a spots over the Buccaneers. Speaking of the Falcons, next group has the Commanders at 11, the Falcons at 10, the Cowboys at 9, and the Packers at 8. Commanders, another dominating win, this time over the Cleveland Browns. I know not the best team, but the Commanders, was that 4 straight wins? They're playing great. This feels low, but they haven't beaten the best teams. Like, they beat the Bengals, they beat the Cardinals, they beat the Browns. Who else did they beat? Because I'm trying to base it off the rankings. I don't want to move a team up just for winning. If they beat the Ravens, they are 100% getting potentially in that top 5. Don't get that wrong. But they beat the Giants, the Bengals, the Cardinals, and the Browns. And that's not a single one of those teams are in the top 16. So they haven't had the most impressive wins. They have been dominating, blowing their teams out a lot of the times. But I didn't want to put them in the top 5 for beating those teams when I've liked what I've seen for the top 5 teams more. Falcons at 10, coming off a great win over the Bucks. I thought they deserved to be higher than the Bucks. Them and the Commanders could be switched, to be honest. Cowboys at 9. I know it was a messy game. It took them till 1 a.m. in the morning with the delay. But they got the win over a Steelers team who I had at 14. And so I gave them a couple spots. Packers at 8, coming off of a win versus the Rams. I know they were 24th, but I think the Packers just looked better than the Cowboys overall, and I didn't want to raise the Falcons too high. Again, Commanders, Falcons, Cowboys, and Packers could all get flipped around. Next group we have is the Niners at 7, the Bills at 6, and the Texans at 5. Essentially, with these three teams, it was originally the ranking of these three was Niners, Bills, Texans. Texans beat the Bills, so I put them over the Bills. And then the Niners lost to the Cardinals. So I think that's fair to have those teams be Texans, Bills, Niners. All three good teams, all three teams could contend in the playoffs. That's just how it goes after this week. And then the last group, we have the Ravens at 4, the Lions at 3, the Vikings at 2, and the Chiefs at 1. Chiefs at 1, they were 1 and they won a game. And they actually won pretty easily for the first time in what seems for this season. So I have them at 1, Vikings at 2. They're still undefeated. Lions at 3, they had a bye. I'll give the undefeated team the nod there. And then the Ravens almost lost to the Bengals, but they only went down one spot because I didn't want to put them above the Lions for beating the Bengals. But that will conclude my power rankings for week 6 of the 2024 NFL season. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.